Have you ever wondered if you have ADHD? Well, today I'm going to be talking about the 10 warning signs of adult ADHD, whether you have it or not. Hi, I'm Dr. Legrand, and so let's dive right into it. So the very first warning sign to adult ADHD is if you have poor listening skills. So if you've had a spouse, a partner, a friend, someone, a family member has told you you really stink at listening, that you are someone that just zones out when someone's having a conversation with you, that your mind starts to wander, then there's maybe chances you might have ADHD, especially when it comes to adults. The reason this might be happening, and to kind of explain a little bit more, is that people with ADHD tend to really hyper focus on certain things, or their mind might wander because it has to do a lot with the hyper focus. So maybe there's one word that might have been said in that conversation, so your mind starts to wander because you're hyper fixating on that. And so this could be a possibility. The second warning sign has to do with struggling with organization. So are you someone that actually struggles organizing or paying your bills or finishing up tasks or just putting anything in an organized fashion? Well, there might be chances that you might have adult ADHD. The other part of this is why this might be happening is when people do have ADHD, the prefrontal cortex, so the part of the front of our brain, tends to be a little bit more deficient. And that has to do a lot with organization and processing, executive functioning issues like time management. And so this might explain why you are having trouble with organization. There might be chances that you might have adult ADHD. Third warning sign is, are you someone that gets distracted all the time? Does your mind tend to wander off? And a lot of times with people with ADHD, especially if you're the inattentive type of ADHD, is that you'll have attention issues where you have a hard time paying attention. So that's like we talked about, having a hard time paying with conversations, but even with lecture, or even when it comes to detailed tasks that is very strenuous, they might have a hard time paying attention and miss things that might be important. So therefore, it is easy to be distracted with several things, because another thing, a part of this is what happens with people, especially with adults with ADHD, is when it comes to sounds, we tend to be very hypersensitive. So if there is a particular sound, it might distract us from our work, or our phones can also distract us, or anything that is outside that is trying to distract us, we easily get distracted because we hyperfixate it and we're very hypersensitive. The fourth warning sign for adult ADHD is trouble starting a task. So if you're somebody that has an issue with procrastination, there might be chances that you might have ADHD. And this is very common with people with ADHD, is they have a hard time actually initiating the task, doing it because they might feel it's too daunting, so they push it off until the very end. Then all of a sudden, oh great, now I can actually do it all. Well, what's going on here is it has to do with lack of willpower and motivation, and more in depth when we're talking about the brain, with the ADHD brain, has a lot to do with the neurotransmitters such as low dopamine, norepinephrine, which has to do with also initiation of motivation and drive, especially if we could actually see the reward of finishing a task like that. So that's why we have a hard time actually initiating a task, because of the different brain chemistry in our brain not having enough dopamine, norepinephrine, and other different neurotransmitters to actually initiate that task. The fifth warning sign, are you someone that is a reckless driver or an angry driver? This is common with people with ADHD, is because what happens if you are someone that has ADHD, well, we already talked about you have issues with paying attention. And so this happens a lot with people with ADHD, is they're not paying attention too much on the road. They're also not paying attention how fast they are driving. So they can tend to be a little bit more on the side of being a reckless driver or getting into accidents because of these different issues going on. And the sixth warning sign of adult ADHD, if you have it, has to do with outbursts and anger. Now, it's very common with people with ADHD to have emotional dysregulation issues, especially when it comes to dealing with hypersensitivity to their emotions. And sometimes we hear or we sense things a lot more heightened than most people, and so we perceive things a little bit differently. And so that can really trigger us as far as, having the emotions of high anger, anxiety, or even depression. These all can play different roles. Or also what is known as rejection sensitivity dysphoria is where you have a hard time dealing with rejection. And that is very common amongst with people with ADHD. And so if you're having these experiences, there's chances that maybe you do have ADHD and should be assessed. The seventh warning sign when it comes to ADHD, with having trouble relaxing or feeling restless all the time. And this is very common when it comes to adults. Now, with kids with ADHD, they might seem more hyperactive, but even then, that is being restless. But when it comes to adults, what happens is that you do have that higher anxiety. You feel restless mentally and also physically. Not so much as a kid with the physical part, but as adults, that does happen. And why this is happening, in fact, over 50% of adults, especially with ADHD, tend to be diagnosed with anxiety, which explains a lot of people who have adult ADHD tend to be more restless physically and mentally. Which leads into my eighth warning sign for adult ADHD, and this has to do with low energy. And this is what's very confused in the ADHD community, because most times people think people who have ADHD have high energy. That might be true when you are a kid. You might have had lots of energy and you were told told that you were very hyperactive, but that's not always the case, especially for women. They don't tend to be the hyperactive type. But when it comes to adults, once you have reached adulthood, guess what? It might flip on you because you've been running on stimulants on very high, and then you reach burnout, and you actually have the opposite. You tend to be really tired all the time, or you might have spurts of being hyper-focused and then have no motivation and feel very depressed. So you hit these highs and lows throughout the day, and it can be very troublesome, especially when it comes to diagnose you to having possibly ADHD because of these experiences. This is something that is missed all the time and something I see all the time with my patients and clients. The 9th warning sign when it comes to adult ADHD, if you have it, is trouble prioritizing. So are you someone that has a difficulty trying to prioritize your day or the tasks that you need to be doing, like what's most important to least important? You might probably actually put it in place, but actually doing it is a challenge because you might do something that like, wow, what did I do all day? I should have gotten this done. You have a hard time prioritizing those different tasks that are the most important to the least important. Now, really why this is happening, like I was saying before, is because it comes to more to the distractions, like with all the other warning signs that we mentioned, and having issues with attention, and also the motivation to initiate the task. Because our most important priority task might be the most difficult, but someone with ADHD that has a hard time with the motivation already and also has the issue with the distraction, the attention, usually those prioritizing of tasks are going to be pushed off and doing things that are maybe not as important, and then we get in trouble with, you know, either our spouse, partner, friends, family, people, our coworkers, whoever it might be. So if you're actually experiencing this, there's chances maybe you do have ADHD. The 10th warning sign has to do with trouble being on time. Now, it's very common with people with ADHD, what we call is time blindness. They have a really hard time understanding the concept of time. And it really has to do with more having issues to dealing with the distractions, the attention issues. And you can get distracted with one thing, and guess what? Hours go by and you're like, oh my goodness, where did the time go? That is very common with people with ADHD. So are you someone that has tendency to miss appointments or even miss very important family gatherings, events, or deadlines? If this is you, there could be a chance that you might have adult ADHD and should have it checked out. Now, I guess there's 11. I did say 10, but here's a bonus one, is if you have this, is the 11th warning sign is having trouble and keeping track of a conversation. So you're losing track of the conversation, or you're someone that interrupts the conversation because you're losing track of the conversation. So do you find that you're interrupting conversations, or your mind wanders because you're not actually paying attention of what's being said? If that's you, that's very high chance that you might have ADHD and should really get checked out. But if anything, if any of these actually warning signs did relate to you, you should watch this video right here that goes into the next steps of how you should get diagnosed with ADHD, all the details about it. So you should watch this video right here, right now.